year we are happy to present three very unique speakers. First of all, I'd like you to note that our next lecture is on a Tuesday night, April 10th instead of Wednesday. And we'll have Rick Beyer with us. He's an author and documentary filmmaker. Our third lecture will be back on Wednesday, April 25th, with Juliet Kayyem, who's a national security advisor for CNN. Tonight, we're very pleased to have Mr. Jerry Thornton with us, a well-known figure in the Boston area. Mr. Thornton is a sports commentator, blogger, writer for Barstool Sports, a co-host for NBC's podcast, Laces Out, and a stand-up comedian. He is a former co-host of WEEI sports radio show Dale and Holly with Thornton, and NBC News New England Patriots pregame show. Mr. Thornton appeared in HBO's Emmy-winning documentary film called Reverse of the Curse of the Bambino, and is also in the Deflategate film 4 Games in Fall, which was just released this month. Mr. Thornton's book, From Darkness to Dynasty, The First 40 Years of the New England Patriots, follows the Patriots from their humble beginnings through the 2001 season to their first Super Bowl win. So I invite you to welcome Mr. Thornton.
Thank you very much, Wakefield. A lecture series. Like, I've done a lot of book presentations. This is the first one anyone called a lecture. This is it. And it's going to be nice to be part of a lecture for once that isn't my wife telling me to clean up after my sloppy self. Anyway, thank you very much for that introduction. I appreciate it. Just, by way of further introduction, I spent 2 years working for WEEI Sports Radio, which is a joy. I could have stayed longer. It's just because Barstool is just a better opportunity, and it's a national audience. It's more money. But anyway, one of the things I loved to do at WEEI was not only get to talk about the Patriots for a job, which is an amazing thing to get to do. I got to interview people. I got to do a podcast, which was fun. I spent that podcast mostly talking about things that weren't straight up sports, the things that we didn't talk about for 4 hours a day. So I had on other comics, I had on some reality TV stars, just people who interested me. I had some book authors, and I had on the amazing Kreskin. The amazing Kreskin, who really is amazing, who's been in show business for 65 years, who was on The Tonight Show before Johnny Carson was on The Tonight Show and is still rocking it. I had on a guy, a service member who served with Chris Kyle, the American sniper. He wrote his memoirs. Well, anytime I had on a book author, my first question was always, why? Straight up, no introduction, why? Why did you write this book? I will ask and answer that same question. The reason I wrote this one, From Darkness to Dynasty, the first 40 years of the Patriots, is simply because I always wanted to read this book. And I waited, and the universe was taking its sweet-ass time getting around to doing it, so I said, I will jump on the grenade, and I will tell this story. The reason being that the Patriots of the 21st century have been the center of the football world, while football hasn't just been America's #1 sport. It's been America's #1 thing. It's the most popular institution in the country. Bigger than any band, bigger than any TV show. Pro football on TV is the only show whose ratings go up every single year as we have more options. We've got apps, and we've got podcasts, and we've got the internet. Football gains popularity every year. During this time, the Patriots haven't just been the center of the football universe. They have dominated on the field, right? Just in the 21st century, they've been to 8 Super Bowls, if you're counting. They have been to 6 straight AFC title games, which is completely unprecedented. They've not only dominated on the field, they've also dominated off the field, like news stories that no other team in all of American sports could have produced. Perhaps raise your hand if you've heard of a little thing called Deflategate. Anybody? Right, okay, yeah, everyone, right. Because you couldn't avoid it. Because for 2 weeks, this story about whether or not the quarterback of a football team might have spritzed a little bit of air out of the balls before he played wasn't the biggest story in sports. It was #1 on the national newscasts. Right? It led off the network news, bigger than the worst winter on record, the war on terror, the economy, the elections. It was that. Well, this book is not about those Patriots. This book is about the Patriots that were completely irrelevant. The ones that were laughingstocks on the field, that were the worst team in all of sports, the team that nobody could care about. It's semi-autobiographical in terms of like some of the things that I remember when I was a kid, when the Patriots weirdly made this impression on me and became really important to me. Things like, remember the Sears catalog? The Christmas wish book, right? That was like the Bible of kids if you were over the age of, say, maybe 40. And it was this thick of just pages of NFL gear, right? Like I would go through this and pick out my stuff, and you could get sweatshirts and hats and team jerseys and plastic helmets. You could outdo your entire bedroom just in football stuff, right? Pennants and posters and bedspreads and wastebaskets, lampshades. And at the bottom of all of them, in little tiny Yag type, it would say, not available in the following teams. Patriots. A time when, and I see a couple of guys here, maybe in their 20s or 30s, where the Pats games, half of them weren't on TV because there'd be 19 people rattling around in their stadium, and they would black them out locally. So you either had to go to a bar, or like me, I'd be this loser sitting there in my house listening to them on a clock radio. You know, all the normal kids are out playing in the snow. Little bit about me. I grew up in Weymouth, Massachusetts. I'm the youngest of 5. And again, Weymouth, so talk slow. No. And my brothers raised me to be a Patriots fan first. Now, at different points in my life, the other 3 teams took turns dominating, right? When I was real little, Bobby Orr and the Big Bad Bruins, right? I mean, if there is a skating rink in your town, it's because Bobby Orr was drafted by the Bruins and for no other reason, right? The Celtics drafted Larry Bird when I was in high school, and so that rebooted that dynasty. In between, the Red Sox were going to the World Series every 10 years, breaking people's hearts, but they were super relevant. They were the center of the conversation. And weirdly, I was a Patriots fan first. Yeah, I don't know what it was. They made some sort of weird imprint on me, like that stray dog with 2 different colored eyes and 3 legs or whatever that followed me home from school. During that time, to say that, you know, the Patriots were your favorite of the 4 Boston teams was like someone asking you, I don't know, who's your favorite 3 Stooges? And you say Shemp. I'm glad you understand Shemp is a nightmare who never made anybody laugh, and yet that was my thing. So a lot of this book, a lot of these stories are sort of the oral history that I grew up with in my house. Some of it I lived through, some of it I just kind of knew from being told. A lot of it was research that as I dove into it and as I sort of peeled back the layers of the onion, I found out that they actually, and I didn't think it was possible, sucked more than I thought they did. Just even their origin story alone. They started in the old, what it was then called the American Football League, which is now the American Football Conference, like the Patriots are in. It was 7 guys, 7 millionaires, looking to challenge the NFL. They called themselves the Foolish Club. Because even in 1959, it was a ludicrous idea to think that you could take on pro football and challenge them. Well, they had 7 teams, and they needed an 8th. So this group of millionaires somehow tapped into a Boston guy named Billy Sullivan, who had used to work for the old Boston Braves. That's his only claim to fame. That was the only reason why they would have brought this guy in. He had nothing. Again, these guys were all like hotel magnates and in the oil business, and they were lawyers, they were real estate tycoons. Billy Sullivan at that point worked for an oil company in Boston, which to me is like owning the best lobster boat in Oklahoma. Like, I don't know why, an oil company in Boston, what is that? But anyway, he scraped together money that he and his wife had put away to buy a cottage down the Cape. This is true. That's how he bought his interest in pro football. And what he got was a piece of paper that said, you now own a football team in a league that doesn't exist. You don't have any football players. You don't have anyone who knows how to run it. You don't have a coach. You don't have anyone who ever drafted a team. Oh, and you don't have a stadium. So the first 11 years, the Patriots played their home games various times. And I bet a lot of you guys know this, right? They started out at BU because that's where the Braves used to play. He had a connection there. They played at BC. They played at Harvard. Fenway Park for a few years, right? You saw them there? Which, you know if you're familiar with the footprint of Fenway, and we all are, they've had games there recently, like Notre Dame played Boston College there. Fenway is uniquely terrible to watch a football game at, right? Like, because they had home plate was like one end zone, and then the other end zone was out around the right field bullpen, meaning that the really good seats along the sidelines were the worst seats because you couldn't see a bloody thing through all the players standing in front of you. So their solution was they moved both benches to the left field side. They set up bleachers out there. Well, see if you can see the flaw in that plan. You've got two teams of football players on the same frickin' side of the same friggin' field. So it's a simple matter. Guys just kept walking into each other's team meetings and stuff going, they say they're going to run the ball more. And there is footage that I found from the research on YouTube. Someone did a special on the 100th anniversary of Fenway a few years ago, and they had footage of these Pats games where someone would throw an incomplete pass, it would bounce once and never hit the ground again because a fan would hop the wall, grab the ball, and a guy literally on film just ran right out the exit at the center field wall. And this happened on a regular basis. During that time, they once played a home game in Birmingham, Alabama. One time they were going to play the San Diego Chargers at Fenway, and there was a little fly in the ointment there, is that the Red Sox, 101 shot to go to the World Series, went to the World Series and needed the stadium. How you doing, sir? Welcome. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. If this was a comedy show, I'd rip that guy apart, but I appreciate you coming out, man. This is great. Thank you. So they had a game against the Chargers. They had to move it, so their solution was to play it in San Diego. To give away the one thing they had going for them, which is home field advantage, by playing in the road team's home stadium, which, by the way, if I can read a map, is 3,000 miles away. Somehow, in a continent like the United States, from coast to coast, they couldn't find another football stadium closer to Boston than San Diego. During this time, they went through one coach after another, as you can imagine. And if I can just, by way of background, you might have heard of probably the most famous Super Bowl of all time, Super Bowl III. That was the Jets against the Colts. Now, the Jets represented the AFL, and everyone felt like they're never going to win. It's not a good team. This league dominates. Well, through a miracle, they ended up winning the game. And it was phenomenal. Well, Billy Sullivan was down there looking for a new head coach, as he always was. And he was going to hire a guy who was highly recommended. One of the assistants on one of these teams, everyone told him, this guy has a great football mind. He's young, he's bright, he's going to make your team respectable. Well, that guy coached the Colts, who had just lost. And he said, I can't hire this guy. Like, I'll go back to Boston, they'll kill me. The Sharks are already circling me as it is. So instead, he hired this assistant from the Jets who had been recommended by Joe Namath. And that's it. Joe Namath, the guy who pretty much, a party boy who spent all his time chasing chorus girls at Toot Shores, recommended him. Well, Sullivan felt he had no choice, so he hired that guy, that Jets assistant. Well, the Colts guy he did not hire was a gentleman by the name of Chuck Noll. who went on to coach the Steelers for about 20 years and won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. That's never been done. The guy that he hired instead was a gentleman named Cleve Rush, spelled Clive but pronounced Cleve, who went on to have a nervous breakdown. I'm not exaggerating. That is literally, he ended up institutionalized from coaching the Patriots. Now, true story. The first one of these I ever did, I just kind of talked like you and I are talking, and a guy who clearly had been to a lot of book events came up to me afterwards and he says, yeah, that was good, but you really should do a reading. You gotta do a reading. I'm like, okay, cool. You know, the people have spoken. So let me introduce you guys to Cleve Rush, or how he was introduced to Patriots fans. Establishing shot. The Patriots are holding a press conference. Team brass and assembled media fill the conference room. It's Cleve Rush's second day with the club. He met with the Boston media on his first day, and now the team has called this press conference to introduce their new general manager, George Sawyer, whom they had hired to replace Ed McKeever. For the last 8 years, Sawyer had also been with the Jets as director of player personnel, so Rush has the honor of introducing him. Rush steps to the podium, grabs the mic stand, and the new head coach of the Patriots is standing before the world with 120 volts of electric death running up his arm. Everyone looks on, jaws open, frozen in horror, not knowing how to react. Through some bizarre wiring mishap, the microphone was connected to a wall outlet. Now, fortunately for Rush and whatever insurance company handled the Patriots' workman's comp claims, one man keeps his wits about him. Team director Danny Marr pulls the plug and probably saves Rush's life in the process. Rush takes a moment, regains his composure, goes back to the podium, and one of those grace under fire moments says, I heard the Boston press was rough, but I had no idea you'd be this rough. Brilliant. Now, as I read this next part, just bear in mind what the NFL is like now, where every player is given a tablet with all the plays you could ever hope to call up, like on computerized in there, where these guys travel in luxury. The Patriots have 2 new planes that they just retrofitted for themselves. They stay in 5-star hotels. Again, not the Patriots that this book is about. That's a little chapter I call Mutiny on the Bedspread. On one road trip to Buffalo, the plan is for the team to fly in the day of the game and then fly home right after, rather than spring for an overnight stay at a hotel. They'd go right from the airport to the stadium with just enough time to eat, get suited up, and then take the field for warm-ups. The problem was the time of the flight to New York had changed to much earlier in the day, so the team would have hours to kill and no place to do it. Now, Patriots director Paul Sonnenberg's family happened to own a motel in Buffalo, and he made arrangements so the players could get rooms for the afternoon. But the Pats had also made a deal with the manager, no messing up the beds. Players could lie down on top of the bedspread, but they couldn't sleep in the beds because he didn't want to have to pay the chambermaids to come in later and make them up again. Any player who pulled back his covers would be fined $5. Now, this was 40 years before Dateline NBC and CSI would show us what hotel bedspreads like by, shining black lights on them and show us that they all basically look like Jackson Pollock paintings from all the bodily fluids and DNA all over. Nevertheless, most of the players simply refused to cooperate just on general principle. A mini uprising took place in which the players ripped back their covers and took their nappies between nice clean sheets like free men. Right, now again, getting back to Cleve Rush, quick note about him, he had a unhealthy and debilitating fear of snakes. Now, I'm not talking a good, manly Indiana Jones fear like I have, but he was terrified. So sometimes people would, the players would just throw like a fake rubber snake in his carry-on luggage just to watch him freak out and climb the walls of the plane. But again, now this is when they were playing at Boston College. The combination of a mentally unstable coach and a cramped, run-down stadium at BC worked out about as badly as you'd expect. The crowds at BC were notoriously rowdy and abusive, a bad situation for a mercurial thin-skinned crackpot like Rush. He repeatedly got into it with hecklers, which, to the surprise of no one but Rush, just created a vicious cycle of more heckling. The school's administration was furious. Billy Sullivan was mortified. He pulled Rush aside and explained to him that the Pats were barely hanging on financially, and it was only because Boston College was willing to do them a favor that they had any place to play at all. Besides, he said, pretty soon it would not be their problem. He explained to his coach that he'd been talking with Harvard about moving into their stadium the following year. Now, the deal was not done, and he was telling Rush this in the strictest confidence and asked him not to mention it to anyone until everything was finalized. Rush publicly apologized to BC, and the controversy died down. At least for a few days, which is how long Rush kept his mouth shut. With the team leaving for its next road game, he kicked the entire press corps off the team plane because he had something super secret to tell his players. When the press was gone, he announced to the team that he'd been talking personally to the president of Harvard and that he had worked out a deal to move the Patriots there. But he ordered the players not to mention it to reporters or tell anyone else until after the season was over. When the press was allowed back on board, they found out immediately what Rush had said. From the flight attendant. That's a true story. Now, when they finally did get a stadium of their own, I have a very vivid memory of the first pro sporting event I ever got to see was at the stadium in Foxborough. I think most of us, I think the normal course of things, your dad takes you to your first game and it's a Red Sox game because it's baseball and you can relax or whatever. But my dad passed away when I was little. That wasn't in the cards, but my older brothers would take me to Foxborough, and I have this vivid memory of walking in there and I'm ready to be dazzled, right? Oh my God, this is the NFL. This is what I watch every Sunday. These pro teams, these giants among men, the Steelers, the Cowboys, the Raiders. And I walked in there and I remember I looked around and I said, you know what, I'm just a kid, but even I know this place is a dump. Right? It was like those 4 concrete bleachers, right, with those aluminum bench seats that would just suck the body heat right out of your thighs, right? Like if you went to a game in November, your core body temperature wouldn't get back up to 98.6 until like July of the following year, right? And you remember what it was called, by the way, when it first opened? Schaefer Stadium. Now, we're all used now to every stadium that gets built, they sell the naming rights, they call it. Like Gillette paid like $30 million to have that be Gillette Stadium. Back then, nobody did it. Like stadiums had names, these high-minded, ideal names, these, municipal buildings that would last forever, like Soldier Field, War Memorial Coliseum, Memorial Field. They didn't only name their stadium after a company. It was a beer company, and let me add that Schaefer was the worst swill that has ever been brewed and put into a can, right? In a world where we're bringing back all these old beers, hipsters are making Pabst Blue Ribbons popular again. Or, God, I was somewhere last week that was sponsored by Narragansett, which had gone away for a while. Nobody is asking for Schaefer to come back. Right? And do you remember what their slogan was? No, that was Miller. No, it was Schaefer is the one beer to have when you're having more than one. Take a look at that for a second through 2018 sensibilities, right? Imagine a company today trying to push that one past Mothers Against Drunk Driving, right? Well, I'll tell you, this stuff is basically garbage, but if you have enough of them, you can't tell the difference, And when they first opened it, it was for an exhibition game, they found out that the toilets didn't work. There was about 2-inch thick puddle of raw sewage everywhere in the stadium. There are stories about people just being directed to go into an empty room with 4 concrete walls and just do their business against the wall. And I've heard legend of grown men sitting down in a cardboard box, which I don't want to, try to unsee that for a can. Now think about it, this was 1971. Civilization had pretty much figured out plumbing by then, I mean, the Romans had the aqueduct 2,000 years ago and it worked like mint, So anyway, the story goes, before they were allowed to have a regular season game there, the Foxborough Board of Health said, under no circumstances are you opening until you can prove that the plumbing's going to work. So what the Patriots had to do is get every available body together. So that was front office people, receptionists, sports writers were there. And what they did is they all lined up, and someone fired an air horn, and at the sound of the horn, everyone had to run into the stalls and flush as many things as they possibly could to make sure that they could have it there. That's a moment in Patriots history we call the Royal Flush. Somehow managed to not happen to any other team. And you know, if you went to that old stadium, and I laugh anytime someone talks about like unruly fans in this day and age. A game at Schaefer wasn't a football game, it was a breakdown of societal order. It was Lord of the Flies with goalposts at either end. I have this vivid recollection. It was a game late in the season, and I'm sitting there, and I hear this guy getting thrown out, but people get thrown out every minute and a half. It was nothing unusual, except security was carrying this guy physically. 4 guys, each had a limb, and this guy's thrashing, he's yelling, and as God is my witness, he was dressed as Santa Claus. Well, I'm like, what's wrong? What's wrong with Santa Dad? Little kids in therapy to this day, I'm sure, over that. And then famously, they had some Monday night games there that live in infamy. Because what they found out when they had Monday night games at Schaefer, was, let's say the kickoff's at 1 on a Sunday. People hit the tailgate scene, start really getting into the booze at 9 or 10 in the morning. And when the game is at 9 o'clock at night, like it was back then, people start hitting the tailgate scene and hit the booze at 9 or 10 in the morning. Because it was just absolute chaos, where the game went out of hand, people just started increasing their consumption, and Howard Cosell stopped talking about the game and was just describing the action going on below him. Seriously, I mean, it was World War Z. There were people like the police station ran out of lockup space, so they literally were just handcuffing drunks to the chain link fence. And there's a story that's, I always thought it was tragic/comic. I'm dropping the word comic. The more I think about it now as a grown man, it's just pure horror, where a guy at that Monday night game was having cardiac arrest, and an EMT was working on him, trying to revive him, and he feels something on his back, and like, is someone spilling like a beer on me? No, it was a man urinating down his back. That happened, yeah. Now, there was one moment of success, a few of them scattered here and there. One, the Patriots actually qualified for a playoff spot in the late 80s, and the fans stormed the field and tore down one of the goalposts, which back then was kind of like a college prank, but even then it was outdated. Like, nobody was doing that anymore. It's like how at Fenway we still do the wave and Sweet Caroline. You're like, really? This didn't go out of style, and then, with like, members only jackets and pleated khakis. Please, can we stop this? Well, anyway, they didn't just tear down the goalposts and drop them and call it a day. They carried them across the field, and then up the exit ramp, and then down the hill, and went across the parking lot. And I don't know what the end game was, but they were literally carrying these goalposts up Route 1. Now, if you know what Route 1 looks like now, it looked like the same then, right? It's like, liquor stores and parking lots and used storage facilities and low-hanging high-tension wires. See if you can see where this is going. Where these buffoons found out what happens when thin-walled steel touches high-tension wires. 2 of them got electrocuted, survived, and sued the team and their security company, and won, and got like millions of dollars for it. Now, I don't know what part of them got hurt, but I like to think that it was their reproductive system, so that they will never have stupid kids that water down the gene pool any more than their parents already did. All right, thank you for feeling that way, because I have an unanswered email I got from a woman, because you can get in touch with me at jerrythornton.net, and there's a way to send me an email, and she did, and she was aghast that I called these guys idiots, because one of them happens to be her husband. Right, yeah. And she said, do you know what he was doing? Nothing. He was minding his own business, walking down the street. It's like, all right, I might not have been that good in science class at Weymouth High, but I know that electricity gets conducted through metal. It doesn't just leap across the street and kill some innocent bystander. And by the way, that's exactly what I would tell my wife if I did anything that egregiously stupid and got electrocuted. So, anyway, during this time, it wasn't all bad. They had some moments of success. They had a great coach named Chuck Fairbanks in the 70s who had built this team into a wagon. And Fairbanks was just a football genius. He brought innovations to pro football that are still in existence today. The Patriots offense that they're currently running is pretty much an offshoot of his Earhart-Perkins system that he used. He brought in the 3-4 defense. Little problem with him, when they won the division for the first time, it turned out he had quit on the team, had taken a job to go back to college, while under contract with the Patriots, by the way, and was using his office to make phone calls on behalf of his new employer. 1996, Bill Parcells had built this team into a wagon, takes him to a Super Bowl. Turned out while he's under contract, he'd taken a job with the Jets and is in his office making phone calls on behalf of the Jets. That never happened to any franchise ever. It happened to the Patriots twice in one lifetime, right? In between, they went to a Super Bowl. You might remember the one against the Bears, 1985, right? Yeah. Oh, that's right. It was 86. I'm sorry. Well, it was in the 86 year, but it was the 85 Patriots. Yeah. And I remember that game. They were leading 3-0. A little fuzzy on the rest. Anyone? Oh, that's right. They gave up the next 46 unanswered points. But you know what, even then, you could say, and I remember we're going, you know what, hey, they ran into the 85 Bears, the gold standard of excellence. Like, we still compare teams to this day. Hey, you know what, at least they're not the 85 Bears. Well, just as you're feeling good about it, feeling like they may be back and they could be poised to like make a run at more championships, 2 days later, the Boston Globe had a front page expose about a rampant cocaine scandal going through the team. And it was true, and it happened, and they didn't exactly name names, but then those names came out. The players who were named were mortified. The people who were implicated but weren't doing cocaine were mad. Other ones wanted to know who the rats were. 3 years later, they were the worst team in football again and had the #1 pick. One of those times they had a #1 pick, by the way, they used it on my favorite player maybe in the whole book, and that's Irving Fryer. You remember? He was a wide receiver out of the University of Nebraska. Who, among other things, when they were making that run to the Super Bowl in '85, he had a kitchen accident and cut his hand. At least that's what he called it. What it really was he went out to eat with his pregnant wife, told her, "I'm not taking you on the road to Miami with us," and she stabbed him in front of witnesses. You know, even pre-Twitter, it didn't take long to crack that caper. Another time, Fryer crashed his car leaving the stadium at halftime. You know, it's on that day, 30 minutes of football was enough, and it's time to just call it. And get home and watch my shows. And I can't help compare it to a couple years ago when the Patriots went and beat the Seahawks in the Super Bowl. After they won the AFC Championship game, Vince Wilfork was also involved in a car accident on Route 1 after the game. Meaning he found some woman in her SUV flipped over and he reached in and pulled her to safety. Like with his wife and kids in the car, he said, "Hold on, we have to help this woman." Like, that's the Patriots today versus the Patriots of my youth. You know, where he's a hero and this other guy is slamming into a tree like a moron. Anyway, so I suppose you probably should never give away the ending of the story, but I mean, sometimes it works, right? I mean, we all saw Titanic, right? I think everyone knew. Saw where that thing was going right away. So, spoiler alert, if you don't know, the boat sinks. And it was still made a lot of money. Sometimes it's right in the title, right? Finding Nemo. I don't think anyone was surprised. You found Nemo? What the hell? What a twist! So anyway, this one is called From Darkness to Dynasty, and I thought the perfect place to end it is when they broke through and they won that Super Bowl in 2001, because as miraculous as it was, it was no less bizarre in the way it unfolded than a lot of the other bad things that happened. I mean, things that happened to them that if they didn't fall into place exactly as they did, this team doesn't win that Super Bowl, and who knows, maybe never wins any of the remaining 4. Little things, big things, monumental things, all just kind of fell into place. By a brief recap, they went 11-5. Which led to them having that game in the snow against the Raiders. Had they gone, say, 10-6, they would have had to fly out to the West Coast and play at Oakland and probably don't win that game because you remember how close it was. Well, one point during the season, this is a small thing that happened, David Patton, the receiver, catches a ball in overtime against Buffalo and gets knocked unconscious and fumbles. And Buffalo recovers and they're about to kick a game-winning field goal. Well, the officials review the play and realize while he was laying on the ground, his head was touching the ball. I'm sorry, his ankle was touching the ball. His head was out of bounds. By rule, it's a dead ball. The Patriots retain possession. They go down and win the game. Now, a big thing that happened, and we all remember this one, Drew Bledsoe rolls out in a week 2 game against the Jets, gets hit by Mo Lewis, clean hit, but a vicious, violent hit, and split his aorta, like laterally, and almost died, it turned out. Like there's a doctor who claims he was the thoracic, is that the right word, surgeon from Mass General, who was on call that day. And he saw the hit and he said to his wife, watch, my pager's gonna go off any minute now. And he did emergency surgery. If that didn't happen, Bledsoe stays in the game and not get replaced by a guy who I referred to earlier, but I've not mentioned his name, a gentleman by the name of Tom Brady. And who knows, Brady maybe doesn't take over then, maybe doesn't take over till later in the year. For all we know, never takes over, and they don't become the team that they are. A big thing that happened, not big, monumental, historic, was 9/11 affected their season. I don't mean to say it affected it in a positive way, but what happened is the NFL canceled their games that week. And so everything was moved to the end of the season. Well, the Patriots, through a quirk in the schedule, had their bye week at the end of the year. So that was the date that they picked for that game. The team they were going to play was coming off a playoff game. By the time they were playing them at the end of the season, the Panthers were 1-13 and about to fire the coach. So the Patriots essentially, because of 9/11, had a week off at the end of the season, then a bye week that they earned, and then they played that snowball. And a weird little bit of irony. I was talking to a woman out front who talked to some Raider fans who were like still mad about the tuck rule call. That call was correct. That call went against the Patriots in the Jets game that I just mentioned, but no one remembered because we were all just saying, oh my God, Drew Bledsoe's, got hurt. No one ever remembers this thing. I wish the officials got that call wrong, just to stick it to Raiders fans. Just out of pure spite, because they still owe me. Right, when I was a kid, the Patriots team that I first fell in love with played the playoff game in Oakland, and it was the biggest bag job in the history of the world. Patriots who were in that game will tell you they think it was fixed because the officials were so bad. They called a roughing the passer call on Ray Hamilton. That was the worst call in NFL history. And that game, to me, if I'm Batman, that's my parents being killed in an alley. Right, that turned me into the dark, brooding superhero that stands before you right now. But anyway, so all these things come together in 2001, including the tuck rule, including, Bill Belichick's decision to go for the game-winning score or whatever. And so fast forward to, me working at WEEI. And one of the things I got to do every week in the season was talk to Bill Belichick. I mean, sit like meet you away from this man. It was like unbelievable. Like every week I felt like a 4-year-old meeting the mall Santa. Am I going to freeze up? Am I going to cry? Am I going to wet myself? Am I just going to giggle? And so when I first got a copy of the book, my lovely wife says, you ought to give him one. I'm like, you think? She said, yeah, okay, it might be awkward, but I'll give it a shot. Well, this particular day, he had come in from practice and only had a little bit of time. He had to run off to a press conference. I don't know if you know this about him, but he's got a reputation for sometimes being a little grumpy. Yeah, a little persnickety on this day, and that's how he was. Always nice to me. I don't have a bad word to say, trust me. Well, at the end of the interview, I handed him the book. I said, hey, Bill, if you want, you can have this. You're in it. Huh? Look, you win the Super Bowl, whatever. And I swear his whole demeanor changed. He's like, oh, that's great. Congratulations. You should be very proud of yourself. Well, thanks. Take it with my compliments, And he thanks me and he leaves. And he came back a full minute later and he hands it to me. He says, Jerry, can I ask you to sign this for me? I'm like, oh! Jazzy, what's up? And he actually said, look, I have to run off, but if you can sign it and just bring it back next week. I said, sure, that'd be no problem. And it's a good thing he asked me to wait a week because my hand was like this. Like I just would have been scribbled. So yeah, I'd take a bullet for that, man, believe me. Yeah, so I was gonna die before I would ever write a boring, dusty, fact-based history tome. People write those books, more power to them. This, I wanted to concentrate on the fun, the dysfunction, and why we are the way we are. You know what I mean? I wrote it for the people who lived through some of it. People maybe don't know the whole story, but also for guys like my son who have no idea how bad it used to be. In some ways, I'm like that guy who grew up in the Depression, and though I've got some money now, I think like I better save tinfoil. Because he just turned 22, and he's lived through 8 Super Bowls in his lifetime. He missed a couple because he was deployed overseas with the Marine Corps, but he's back now and surrounded by people who hate the Patriots, and we cried real tears into the phone in the last 2 Super Bowls, but it was great. And I just wanted him guys like that to know why we are the way we are, that it's not to take it for granted. I think we appreciate it more because of all the weirdness and the hilarity and the failure, and this era is just unprecedented. Like, this shouldn't happen. Everything in the NFL is designed to prevent this very kind of thing. And it's all started because of a coach that nobody wanted, that the press hates, that they've been against every step of the way, a quarterback who is the 199th pick in the draft and can name you the 6 quarterbacks who were drafted ahead of him. I probably could too. Chad Pennington, Chris Redman, Mark Bulger, Giovanni Carmazzi, who literally is a goat herder. I'm not making it up. Was drafted ahead of Brady. And Brady, 18 years into this century, is still the best quarterback in football. So it's an amazing story. I don't think there's anything like it in American culture, and it's still going on. And so I've had a lot of laughs. The most rewarding is coming to places and talking to other Patriots fans and getting their feedback and hearing their stories, and it's been great. So I've talked way too much. I want to hear from you guys with questions or comments or whatever. But thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. Anyone got anything for me? Yes, over there. Hi. In a word, overblown. I just am convinced that it's so overdone because the Patriots are good copy. And the guy who started this whole thing is a guy from ESPN, the magazine, named Seth Wickersham, who co-authored an article, a hit piece, a couple of years ago. It was 3 days after Brady won his appeal in federal court. And it basically was a recitation of every rumor ever told about the Patriots, like how they have listening devices in the locker room, how the Seahawks thought they were spying from the hills up above their practice facility, on and on, like that they go through the other teams' trash to find their playbooks, and all this like crazy, just chasing ghosts. And so, do I think maybe there's been some tension? Sure, Robert Kraft used that expression, but how would there not be? These guys have been working together for a long time. They're strong-willed, bright, accomplished people, the best there ever been at their professions. There's going to be some, but how that went from, because it's the Patriots, everything is seen through that microscope. You know, everything is just amplified to the point where, oh, Brady hates Jimmy Garoppolo. Really? It's funny because I've heard from one of the best reporters around who says Garoppolo has a key card to Brady's workout facility and goes there all the time. But it was told that he was banned from there. Absolutely not true. That Kraft forced Belichick to trade Garoppolo to placate Brady. You couldn't get Bill Belichick to go like this if you said there's food on your cheek, you know? Bill Belichick does Bill Belichick things, and this one time Kraft finally says, no, he traded Garoppolo because there was no way to keep him without making him the starting quarterback. Garoppolo's being paid $27 million right now. Were they going to pay him $27 million to not play? What messed up their plans to have Garoppolo be the successor to Brady was Brady being so good and looking amazing and winning the MVP. He's thrown for almost 1,000 yards in the last 2 Super Bowls, and there are people that say, oh, they wanted to start Garoppolo. It's insane. So, yeah, in a word, it's just so overblown, but that's the Patriots. They went from, irrelevant in this book to so hyper-relevant that any story about them just gets blown way out of proportion. And the last I looked, there was a video of Belichick, who was supposedly disgruntled and wanted out of here, like working out guys at their pro days at these colleges around the country. They're at meetings together. Brady's working hard. Gronk's working hard. And so take all that stuff as just the meat. Take it as fake news. It's fake news. The media making up stuff. Gonna build a stadium. It's gonna be a beautiful stadium. I don't think so. Yes, sir. Hi.
Who took over the team from Sullivan?
That's an interesting story too. Sullivan had to eventually. The team just was in bankruptcy, and one of the things that bankrupted it was Michael Jackson, the Michael Jackson, like the king of pop. And it's a long story, but in a nutshell, he had 2 sons. One who ran the football operation, the other one who ran the business side, and both were morons. Really, and the guy I'm talking about is Chuck Sullivan. I met his wife recently, and I felt really bad. She goes, "Oh no, he's my ex-husband. You're right about everything you said about him." So he got it in his head when Michael Jackson was reuniting with his brothers, and this is post-Thriller Michael Jackson, when he was the biggest pop star, short of the Beatles in the history of music. This guy decided to be the manager of his tour. And he knew nothing about it. He didn't know Michael Jackson's music. He didn't understand how he never put on a concert tour. And he ended up losing the stadium. And he put it up as collateral to get this and lost it. It goes to auction and it's bought by an obscure cardboard box manufacturer by the name of Robert Kraft. Now, the worst day of my life as a sports fan was, briefly, for a while it was owned by the guy from Victor Kayam of Remington Razors, who turned out to be just an empty suit of the highest order, and he had to he did some really stupid, sexist stuff, and even back then, before Me Too, the other owners forced him to sell. He sells to this guy from St. Louis named James Orthwein, part of the Anheuser-Busch family. Well, anyway, my worst day as a sports fan, I go into my old day job and I put on the radio, and Will McDonough, the most plugged-in, informed football reporter of all time, says the Patriots are moving to St. Louis today. It's gone. And once football left here again, it was never, ever coming back. And instead, that very afternoon, it was bought by Robert Kraft. He used the stadium as leverage to buy the rest of the team. And by the way, didn't tell his wife. He spent $175 million on the worst team in pro sports on an impulse purchase. Now, I have the greatest wife in the world, present company excluded, and she's totally understanding. Believe me, take a look at me, I'm no prize, right? And we go places that looks like a kidnapping in progress, you know what I mean? People are asking for Amber Alerts and stuff, but anyway. Last year, around Father's Day, I go into a Dick's Sporting Goods and I buy myself a golf bag that I can give to her to give to me. And within 5 minutes, I get a call from her going, I saw on my phone, did you just make a purchase of a golf bag? Bob Kraft went home and told his wife, "Yeah, I just bought a football team," and that thing is worth like probably $2 billion today. So yeah, it's been a long road from an owner who was broke to one who was an idiot to one who was trying to move the team to the best owner in sports, who built the stadium, by the way, after all these years. He's the one who did it with his own money. Also turned down a chance to move the team to Hartford, Connecticut for no money. They would have built him a stadium and he kept it there instead. So, yeah, again, that's why I am the way I am. Yes, sir. It was all his. Yeah, I was in, if you don't know, Barstool Sports that I write for, began as a newspaper in Boston. It was like a twice a month free newspaper in the bins, like where the Metro is or whatever. So I just was randomly found this site that was looking for writers. And I got in touch with them and I sent them a sample and he said, "Okay, you're in." Doesn't pay anything. Like, all right, so I liked it and I stuck with it. And I went from surprised if anyone had ever heard of us to surprised when someone hadn't, to this, we sort of morphed into blogging on a daily basis. And I had a day job. I was working for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and my bosses were furious that I was like goofing off at work and doing this stuff and whatever. And I just knew that I wanted to keep doing it, hoping it could turn into something. And what it turned into was the biggest site on the internet. Like, it's taken over the world. So I'm him, he had two other writers, and then me. So I'm one of the original four. But he would tell you it's just, he worked in a cubicle one day and said, "I can't do this the rest of my life." And I just was a terrible employee. That was my thing. I just, like, here at my old job, people would ask me like important questions, and I'd say, "I don't know. I'm just on my phone looking up stuff about the Patriots. I'm sure you're doing great." So that's why I have to hang on to this job. I'm qualified for nothing else. If it's not this, I'm going to be testing stuff in a lab and selling my blood. Yes, sir.
I know you probably don't know, but what's your opinion as to why the Patriots didn't get more for Garoppolo?
You know what? A couple of things on that. I think Belichick just tends to deal with the guys he likes to deal with. And John Lynch, he had him in Foxborough for a while at the end of his career, and he just got an offer from him. A thing that's really underplayed in this, like I think it's the trading deadline, and Belichick's not, chose not to shop around and call other 31 teams to find out what kind of offers they were going to make. But one thing that really is under-talked about that San Francisco was able to give them in return that literally no other team could was Brian Hoyer, a guy who had been with this team in this system, so they didn't have to train a backup quarterback. Like, they got a guy that they trusted, that knows the reads and the nomenclature and can communicate so that if Brady did have to miss some time, they had someone that they felt that they could trust. And they traded him to Cleveland. You're getting a Cleveland quarterback back, and then if Brady so much as twists an ankle, you might as well just all call it a season, pack up, and shut the lights out. So that is a part of it, and I just think that might have just been the market for Garoppolo. We always hear about, Cleveland had all these first-round picks they were offering. Cleveland's front office went home at 5 o'clock on the trading deadline. The coaches were furious. The coaches were like, "Wait, Jimmy Garoppolo was available? What did you got?" And they didn't even ever bother to find out. So I think it's a combination of things, but also that I think Belichick felt was the market without him, tearing up the phone lines and not being able to get the quarterback in return that he wanted. It's funny too how I literally heard Tony Maz the other day refer to Garoppolo as Joe Montana. Like, what? He played 6 quarters of football before this. And he looks great in San Francisco, and my gut tells me he's going to be terrific, but really? You were just going to say, "Thanks for everything, Brady. You look amazing, great MVP, but go? We're going to hire this guy. We're going to give the keys to him who's played 6 quarters for us before he got hurt." I think there's nobody who's a bigger hero in the Boston media than a Patriot who leaves. They'll hate a guy when he's here, and as soon as he's out the door, "Oh my God, how are we ever going to live without him?" Danny Amendola, they hate him. He can't replace Wes Welker. Well, Wes Welker's been gone for 4 years, and all Sam Amendola does is make huge catches. But as soon as he went out the door, oh my God, he's irreplaceable. So, my rant. Yes, dear.
Tonight on the news, they were saying that Ron, there's a chance he might not play because he's going to be a movie star.
Yeah, this has been sort of reported that The Rock and Sylvester Stallone said, oh, you got to come to Hollywood and make movies. I love Rob Gronkowski. I've got to work with him. I've done some things with Barstool at him. He is a genuinely nice guy, not an ounce of pretense. He goes to, he came to an event with us. He didn't have any handlers. He was pushing kids away. He'd sign every autograph there. He's a terrific guy. He's not Daniel Day-Lewis. You know, I think Tom Hanks is going, oh my God, what am I going to do if Gronkowski comes here? Like, he's got so much range. He's going to play so many characters. Anyway, he did get signed on to be in some movie that has Mel Gibson, some action thing. I'm sure he's going to be nightclub bouncer number 2 or whatever. And I love him, but there's been some speculation that he's like worn out from football. I've had it told to me that he and Brady are just kind of tired of being beaten down verbally by Belichick, and you know what? Maybe there'll be some adjustments made there. Like, okay, that's Belichick's way. He takes the superstars and he rips them so that the 53rd guy on the roster will go, okay, well that's just how you do things here. Like, he's not picking on me. He does it to everybody. But maybe it's gotten old and tired for them. I can't imagine. Gronk is the best in the world at what he does. Yeah, if he goes to Hollywood, is he going to be the best in the world at what he does? I don't think that. And the Oscar goes to, you know. But I'm with you. I hope like heck he stays. He's amazing to watch. He's a joy. He's a character, and you know, he had a healthy season. I think there is some bad blood there, but ultimately, hopefully, cooler heads prevail. You know, the one thing about Belichick is he is adjustable in ways that people don't realize. He understands that, you know, guys in 2018 aren't the way they were in 1975 when he first came into the league, and I think he adapts, and the good Lord willing, he's going to do it here. Yes, sir. I meant to do that. Yeah. It could be. I mean, he plays a game, plays out of his mind. Plays the first half of the next game was even better. Gets a guy, you know, gets pile driven into the turf, has to leave the game. They bring in a rookie who, you know, went out and won his next game. Jacoby Brissett, the Pats won 27-0. Well, the next week we all thought Garoppolo was going to play, and he reported to the stadium early. And game time, last second, he just couldn't go, and they stuck Brissett in there, who didn't play well, but it turns out he needed emergency surgery on his throwing hand after the game. Like, he played really hurt. He gutted it out. They got shut out, but he gutted it out. So we don't know about Garoppolo, but everyone's talking in these definites, like he's this campus guy, and that was in that article that you mentioned, that, oh, Garoppolo, like Belichick wanted him to be the next heir apparent quarterback. But again, there was just no way to keep him without making him the starter now. And you know, every time he wins a game in San Francisco, everyone's going, see, told you. But let's slow our roll here. Let's see how he does after a season. Let's see how he does after 2 seasons. What if he turns out to be an average quarterback? That's great, but I'd rather have the best of all time for as long as he feels he can play. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what's your take on the whole Malcolm Butler situation?
Yep. That's a great question, and here's what I know. And this comes from a guy I really rely on. He's an old friend. He's given me information before. He's a player agent, so he's in the know about a lot of things. He was at the Super Bowl post-game party, talking to Malcolm Butler himself. And he texted me the next day, and he's going, all right, here's what I can tell you. Butler, I asked him what went on. He says he was in a good mood, first of all. And he said, Coach and I just didn't see eye to eye. I go, what does that mean? He goes, that's what it is. Well, he had with him a handler from the Patriots, who, if you remember, Butler was sick for the beginning part of the week. And this Patriots football ops guy was the one who flew him out to Minnesota for the Super Bowl. And the guy told my friend, he goes, they just felt Butler wasn't mentally prepared for the game. Like he just wasn't in the right frame of mind. And I exchanged 100 texts with my friend just to make sure that I'm phrasing this properly, because I want to get it right without making this guy out to be, to make Butler out to be some kind of a nut job, which he isn't, or a discipline problem, which there was none of that to it. It's exactly what they said it was. Oh, I just feel it's in the best interest of the football team. Which I know sounds crazy when they couldn't make a tackle and Butler played 98% of the defensive snaps, but for that game they felt he just wasn't up to speed. And that's been confirmed recently by Butler, who said the same thing. I missed some time and I felt they just felt I wasn't ready to go, and I didn't have the calls down or the game plan or whatever. So it's not that he's a bad guy, and we know that it wasn't like punitive. He wasn't in the timeout chair, for being a bad boy, because who signed him? The Tennessee Titans, coached by Mike Vrabel, and their GM is John Robinson, who worked for 10 years under Belichick. So if the Patriots thought that he's a bad human being, they're not going to recommend him to friends of theirs, guys off their coaching tree. So I get it's a weird situation, and I watched the video of his Super Bowl interception now, and it's like watching your wedding video after a messy breakup, Like I don't really know how I feel about it. Can I recommend briefly a thing? I'm part of a video series with some comic friends of mine. We just released a couple of them. It's called, pardon me, but it's called Shit Pats Fans Say. It's on Facebook, it's on YouTube, and it's just me and these two really super creative guys, and we just sit around and just throw out one-liners. And there's a lot in there about Malcolm Butler this week, so there's a couple of them out there. Please enjoy. Yes, sir.
I just like to preface what I want to say by saying I enjoyed the time that we
Thank you.
but at least you were a local person and not these influencers that
They're taking our jobs. We're gonna build a wall.
like the rest of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
We know these old times, like in your book, we know the good times. And though we know that it's not always perfect, at least it's a lot better than it used to be.
Sure.
And we'll look back on these days and we're going to old and gray.
Oh, sure.
Some of us might be there already. But that, these were very good times, and you should mention about it all the time. Now my question is, I'd like to get your input or thoughts about this latest information about the fact that the NFL changed the catch rule for the Super Bowl and actually applied it to the two catches that were questioned.
All right. Yeah.
And, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, this was on ESPN, where a couple of their main guys, including Chris Mortensen, who was the father of Deflategate, the guy whose fake tweet is still out there and started that whole mess, that they were speculating that, the way they enforced those catches by the Eagles, those ones that they reviewed, is the rule that they changed 2 days ago. Like, okay, sure. My take on that was, yeah, go right ahead. Just pick any year you want and enforce those rules against the Patriots. Fine with me. Like, I'm done with it. They're still bellyaching about the tuck rule, but there's officials, they said, made up the rules as they went. They interpret them however they want, but that's what happens with the Patriots. I can name off the top of my head times when they did something and an opposing team went and got the rule changed so that they can't do it anymore. Going back to the Peyton Manning team of 2003, the Patriots were, physical with their receivers. The Colts went and got the rule changed so you can't be physical with the receivers, okay? That game against the Ravens, the one before the Deflategate game, the Patriots tried all these different formations, all of them legal. They checked with the officials. The officials literally were telling the Ravens, don't defend number 34, and they did it anyway. So the Ravens got that rule changed. They blocked a kick against the Ravens by having Shea McClellan run and jump over the center and then block the kick. That's now illegal. You know, and it's like they just continue to move the rules goalposts. So sure, go right ahead, make up rules in the Super Bowl and cost them one. They also, you know, that funky play that the Eagles ran, that was an illegal formation that should have been blown dead. Actually, it should have been loss of down, and the Patriots take the ball over. But like, yeah, so would I. You know, great show of hands. Right? Oh, the final Hail Mary. Chris Hogan is running right alongside Gronk. And Gronk kept going and Hogan didn't. The little problem with it was somebody had ear-holed him. Someone just drilled him and knocked him flat on the side of his body, which you can't do. And it's right there. The whole world saw it happen. But again, that's our lot in life. You know, it's not a lot, but it's our life. And just at some point they're gonna, you know, outlaw coaches whose names rhyme with Smellicheck. You know, just, oh, sorry, it's totally fair. But again, you know, the league is designed to, you know, make it an even playing field. And the Pats have been such an outlier on this. They have just rewritten the way things are done, and nobody else can catch up to them. So they change rules, they accuse of cheating, they come up with all these theories, and while they're chasing ghosts, they're forgetting things like, this team outworks you, they're smarter than you, they're better coached than you, they see things that you don't see. And listen, I'm happy if they keep thinking it's something other than that. If they continue to not realize they're more competent than you, and that's why they're more successful. So, you know, and they're all still counting down the time when Brady retires. Yeah, keep doing that instead of getting better. Do you get the feeling like I like Tom Brady more than I should? Yeah, oh, this actually happened. I'm going to clean this story up for this crowd, but my brother calls me, and no reason at all. Doesn't even say hello. I just, hey, what's up? He goes, all right, here's the deal. You could beat Brady sleeping with Giselle, or you could be Justin Verlander, the pitcher, with Kate Upton. Who would you rather be? And I said, out of those names you gave me, I think I most want to be Giselle. I was like, dude, that is the creepiest thing I've ever heard. I'm Brady sexual. I'm out there and I'm proud. Please rescue me. I'm sorry, you had a question. He's working out. He should be good. I mean, just judging it by people who had come back from a very similar injury, and it was a non-contact knee thing. Best example I could think of, apples to apples comparison, was Wes Welker, who was back the next year. I thought he's going to have to miss a year. Oh, I love Welker, but here's the major difference, and it's a good one, is Welker hurt his on the last game of the regular season. Edelman hurt his in preseason, so he's had, you know, all of last year, and he'll have all of this year. He'll have 12 months to come back from it. So there's nobody I would put more faith in coming back from it than him. It's just one of those things, you know. And by the way, talking about the way Patriots do things, let's not forget Julian Edelman, who we all agree is like, you know, essential, was a quarterback in college. And they drafted him in the 7th round and turned him into a wide receiver, and now he's the best in the league at his position at slot receiver, and also like another really handsome guy. Like, I don't know what it is. I'm watching a game last year, and there was a bunch of couples, and they showed like Edelman and Brady, and I think Garoppolo was still there, and I think Amendola, and someone said, that is like the Mount Rushmore of handsome men. And it was me. And I'm like, I said to the wives, like, how come no one else is saying this? Or did I say it out loud? Is it just my inside the head was? Yes, hi.
Well, I'm 21, so I only know Patriots that win.
Sure.
So after Brady, do we still keep winning?
After, yeah. I mean, I often get asked a similar thing. It's, who do you think it's more? Do you think it's more Brady, or do you think it's more Belichick? And, you know, I don't want to separate the two. Ultimately, I think it is Belichick, because he's the guy who was able to identify Brady. Do I think he's going to find another one out there? No, but do I think he can find another competent quarterback? Absolutely. I mean, look at how many around the league and how many starting quarterbacks came out of this Pat system. Just last year alone, guys who started. Matt Castle started one. Ryan Mallett is still in the league. Brian Hoyer, Jacoby Brissett, the aforementioned Jimmy Garoppolo. So it's going to require that. I don't feel like he can just throw, any, department store mannequin out there and he's going to win 11 games. But I just think he's got a system down. He knows how to teach it. He knows how to coach it. And I think it stems from him more than anything. Having said that, with Brady still the best quarterback of all time, he's just been, taught and brought up in this system. So, God, I hope it does. I hope it doesn't end. And I kind of have this feeling like maybe when it does get to retirement time, those guys are just going to turn into like forms of pure energy and then just evolve into someone else's body and then just take over and keep on winning. That's how I deal with the reality of it, I don't, hey, one second before I take a question there, sir, right? Oh, my man's wearing the same shirt I am. There we go. And did you wear it for any particular reason? This is today's date. Happy 3/28. It's a holiday around here now. Yeah, really. Sure. You had a question, Chuck. Yeah, I wrote about this today on Barstool, and it's interesting because McDaniels spoke about it for the first time. If you don't know, McDaniels was hired by the Colts to be their head coach, and then as soon as the Super Bowl was over, he pulled a runaway bride on them and just left them stand at the church and just said, yeah, on second thought, I'm going back to the Patriots. Well, his comments were along the lines of, I wish I could quote it verbatim, but it's like, well, after I spoke to Mr. Kraft and Belichick, it had, my situation was clarified going forward. It's, a little bit more definite, and now I understood a little bit more about what my role was going forward. It's like, wait a minute, what changed? I mean, he's still the offensive coordinator, right? It's not like they made him, like Dwight Schrute, like assistant to the regional manager of offensive coordinator. And I could only take those words as Belichick told him, I see where the end is in sight, and you'll be the guy. I don't think I can't imagine it's this year. I'm putting like maybe 5 years on it because, Belichick has 2 sons who are on the coaching staff. That's time to get them some experience, whatever. He has said before, I don't want to be like Marv Levy of the Bills, like coaching into my 70s. He's 65 now. And then I did the math on this. 5 years from now, Josh McDaniels will be 46. That's the age that Belichick was when he took over the Patriots. Also his second head coaching stint. So if I had to guess, I would say it's that. Like he's not going to walk away from football. I think he would maybe be like a front office guy or something. But people say he's gone now. Like there's actually a rumor going on. He's going to draft the team and then just call it a career. Like, wait, in his last game will be that dog's breakfast with Malcolm Butler crying on the sidelines. It's going to go out that way? Are you kidding me? No. And the thing is, I see this guy on his knee in front of his defensive line on the sidelines. I go, he's a coach. He was born to do this. He loves this. There's no part of him that gives off this vibe like, I'm really getting sick of this crap. Like, what's he going to do? Go work on Fox Sunday, and sit there and grab assing with Howie and Boomer. And I don't see that, So that's my speculation today, that McDaniel stayed for a reason that isn't just because he really likes it here. He wants to be a head coach, and I think they said, stick around, we'll make you rich, and we'll make you rich.